Good Tuesday to you, everybody in Gov 603. Welcome to week boom 3. How you doing? You're gonna have to forgive me as I do this video. I've got a bit of a sniffle. It seems like it's allergy season for me all bloody year long. So again, let's get things started off right. A little tea this afternoon. I'm about coffeeed out. Let's see, who do we have here? Oh, yes. Great Smoky Mountains. See if I can get that to focus. Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Beautiful national park. Some absolutely completely unique topography and flora, that is, types of plants. If you live anywhere towards the middle of the nation, go to that park. Very heavily visited. In fact, the most visited of the national parks in the United States. But there are trees there that were missed by the loggers, the lumber industry, that came through in the 1800s and 1900s, and for whatever reason they couldn't quite get to them. And these things are they're big around as a house, and they're huge. They go up hundreds of feet, 200-300 feet. Really a sight to see. I mean, you have to go clear out to the West Coast, like the Big Sur area in California, and up to the giant redwoods to see things this size. It's very interesting flora and fauna. Probably the densest black bear population in the United States is in the Smokies. And no, bears don't, they don't want to hurt you. They just want your food. So don't give them your food and make it so they can't get it, and everybody's going to be fine. But let's take a look at what you're going to do this week in the class. Okay. Again, we are going to continue with some definitions of terms. Now, by the way, week by week, each week's discussions, this being week 3, I will pin those discussions on the discussion board, so they're, near the top, so you don't have to go and look for them. And, I'm afraid I owe you an apology. I had said in the last video for your paper topics that I wanted you to post them. And look, I don't have a requirement that you must do this or you can't do that. Okay, I just want to make sure that you've got a research design proposal that's by way of the proposal, not the research, that's doable. Okay, so anyway, so I said I'd put a discussion link up for you to post those, and then for whatever reason it didn't appear. Canvas is supposed to make our lives easier, and in some ways it has, and there's still it's a little buggy. But anyway, over again in the pinned discussions, when you go over and take a look in Canvas, the paper topics are amongst them. They're up the top, as well as this week's discussions for your readings. So do paste your paper topics. Do get at it, because part 1 is due, coming up here soon. And and me saying coming up here soon is me not being able to remember off the top of my head the due date. But some of you emailed me when I said, hey, no draft work, and you were like, wait, what? No draft work? I can't. It's like, okay, look, if you if you turn this in, the sections for part 1, and it's all in the paper guidelines. All right. This is sort of your draft, because what I will do then is grade those first sections, and now I remember it's February 12th when this is due. I will grade those first sections. I'll give you feedback saying, don't do this, do this. And then if you change it in part 2, all right, and you do better, I'll raise your grade on part 1. So maybe, again, just hypothetically, let's say you get 80 on part 1. I'm not very happy with that. You change this stuff in part 1, then I say, hey, change this. And then when you turn in the paper with the second part added, you get 90. I'll go back and change the 80 to 90. So it is your rough draft, but no rough drafts. I can't evaluate draft work. I need finished work from you. Okay. And that is due on February 12th, which, today is the 23rd. So that gives you what, 1 to about 3 weeks. Okay. You can do that. Okay. All right. Anyway, so back to what you're going to be reading and learning this week, some definitions that you really just have to, make the distinction in your head, say the difference between mean and median and mode. What is a standard area? What is variance? What is standard deviation? These are terms that are going to come up again and again as we go through the material throughout the semester. And it's just like learning, what the Spanish word is for exit or something, salida. Okay, you just memorize it. You just learn it. Okay. Likewise, I need you to pay attention to variables. Now, remember, I think it was last week or maybe a week before that, I gave you the definition of a variable. A variable is anything that any event, person, emotion, item that we're going to study in relationship to another thing. So, here's a crude example. Just since it's here on my desk, this pencil is a variable. My inner ear, if we were going to study the interaction between the one and the other, is a variable. Why would I do that? All right. Excuse me. Variables. Okay. So don't get thrown by the word. Now, variables, this is what I want you to remember. Now, in your readings are going to give you 5 different kinds. Okay, that's fine. Variables are placed into 2 general categories. Okay. Categorical variables and continuous variables. Now, here's something I want you to remember. A categorical variable or a continuous variable, they're not different things like, this magic marker and this chapstick are different things. Okay, categorical and continuous variables, speaking of which, are different ways of describing something. And you could even describe the same thing using categorical data, which we call, the variables, or continuous data. Let me give you an example. Okay. Because this is one that swirls around the headlines. All right. So here we go. Let's talk a little. I'll give you an example to talk about categorical variables and continuous variables. Let's look at gender. Now, I'm going to tell you from the onset here of this example, there are only 2 genders, male and female. All right. But as you're also going to be asked, and you're going to read about, as a researcher, if you're asking the question of how is it the public thinks about something, whether it's a political candidate or an issue, say, should this be taught in schools? It's been a big issue among school boards. All right. Your job as a researcher is to just get at what people think about the issue, not what you think they should think. All right. Now, you may go to work for someone in which that is your job to persuade people to think. But as I've said before, as a researcher, when you put on that researcher cap, be an investigator, not an advocator. Find out what the answers to the questions are. That's all you got to do. If the answer is yes, the answer is yes. The answer is no, the answer is no. That's all you have to do. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to persuade anybody as a researcher. Now, when you step out of that role as researcher and use the data that you've gathered, and maybe you're working for an organization whose job is to persuade people, okay, fine. Use the data that you found to figure out ways to persuade them. All right. But as a researcher, that's not our job. Okay, so let's go back to this. So I will, say clearly from the onset, there are 2 genders. But let's say that we're going to try to examine what the public thinks about it. We could discuss this question, what does the public think about gender, as using either a categorical or continuous variable describing the same thing. Let me show you. So if you constructed a question on a survey and you said, what's your gender? And you listed number 1 is male and number 2 is female. These are categories, male, female. You're asking the respondents to choose either this category or this category. All right. And that's all the choice they have, just 1 or 2. You're forcing the choice into categories, this category or that category. So now you're discussing gender as a categorical variable. But let's say you wanted their opinion on gender. So instead of a question of what's your gender, number one, male, number two, female, and surveys that gather data are often constructed like this. You'll see a statement that goes, and the surveyor, the researcher will write a statement that goes, respond to the statement by selecting a number. And here's the statement. I identify as male. Number one, strongly disagree. Number two, disagree. Number three, no opinion, or no response, or don't care, or something. Number four, agree. Number five, strongly agree. Now you're measuring someone's feeling, attitude about the question. From one, I identify as male, strongly disagree, to five, I identify as male, strongly agree. That is a continuous variable because you've created a spectrum along which your respondent can select an answer, give a response. Do you understand? Okay, so to recap, a variable is any event, anything, any opinion, anything that we want to study, anything. We can lump variables by how we describe them into two general categories, to two general groups, because I don't want to use that word twice. Categorical variables, continuous variables. We can describe the same thing as either a categorical or a continuous variable. It just depends on the questions we ask about it. One of the things, frankly, that the public at large don't get is those people that have a sort of a gender bender ideology. And I mean, there are organizations that are actually dedicated to pushing this ideology. They produce data saying, aha, there's not two genders because that's not how people think about themselves. Well, guess what? One of the little tricks that they're pulling is they're asking the question to generate categorical variables. Now, the question is, as researchers and surveyors, do they understand this is what they're doing and they're just not telling you? Or, and I think this is also possible, as people reading the data and the responses from the survey, do they not understand, that people do not understand the difference between a continuous and a categorical variable and how you can describe the same thing as either one or the other? And they go, aha, people think that their gender exists on a spectrum. It's not this or that. It's not male or female. It's non-binary. That's a bit of a sleight of hand. It's a trick on the part of the researcher to generate only continuous variables. And sometimes, it's described as continuous data. So, if you see that topic, or if you see it put that way, continuous data or categorical data, it's the same thing. Okay. All right. So understand the difference between what we mean in these two big categories, these two big groups. Don't want to use the word twice, of variables: categorical variable, continuous variable. All right. Then I want you to, I've got a little video clip in here from Dr. Jordan Peterson, who is, I'm going to propose to you. Dr. Peterson is one of the preeminent minds, thinkers of our age. All right. And if you don't know who he is, you should pay attention to him. I usually have these things right at my hand, but let me just grab something here really quickly. Okay. Here we go. He has authored 3 books, 2 of which are easier to get at, easier to read than the first. than the third. The first one is Maps of Meaning. Okay, the Architecture of Belief. This is a fantastic book. It's just absolutely brilliant, but it's going to take a little chewing, a little digesting, because it's complicated. Specifically, what is he doing in this book? Peterson is asking the question, and this fundamental question is important for anything that you want to go into. If you want to be in law, if you want to be in politics, if you want to be in psychology, if you want to be in coaching, anything. This is what he's after in this book, is one of the foundational questions of how it and why it is that people do what they do. He asked the question, how is it that people come to meaning about something? Because he starts with the premise that we tend to safeguard and take care of those things and those beliefs, not just things like, say, this coffee cup. This is a thing, okay? But also beliefs, say, being out in wild spaces is good for you. That's a belief that I have. We tend to safeguard things that we value, and we tend to discard or disregard things that we don't value. Well, the question is, how is it then that we establish value? How is it that we find meaning in things? And it is an in-depth look at the development of meaning throughout human history, and it's transcultural and transchronological. That is, he takes a look at cultures from many different places and many different times, and he says, that the things that we value is an interesting proposition in here for you. He said the things that we value arise both out of our physical selves and our spiritual selves, our physical encounter with one another and the world, and the metaphysical, beyond the physical encounter with the world. I've read through and or listened to this book, because I have it on, Audible, I don't know, 5 times, and I'm still getting stuff out of it. There's something I go, oh, aha. Really, really good book. His other two, a little bit more straightforward and accessible. All right. The first one is 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. And then the follow-up companion book, and I encourage you to read them both, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. What's he doing in these books? These are not self-help books. Again, one of the things that interests Dr. Peterson, and this should be right up your alley if you have anything to do with any interest in political science or human behavior, human interaction, sociology or psychology. He asked the question, what sort of state, and I don't mean like Florida or West Virginia, what sort of state, what sort of arrangement best allows people collectively to do well as individually? And he says it's a balance between two things. It's a balance between having enough order, so you don't have chaos, but not having order that's rigid, so you don't have tyranny. So, because you can have tyranny within a political system, or you can have the tyranny of the self. Okay? I mean, within the context of our Christian religion, we call that scrupulosity, where you're constantly saying, oh, I can't do this, I shouldn't do this, I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad. So he's saying, okay, how do we balance those things out? What is the optimal balance? And he breaks it down into 12 principles. The first 12 principles are meant to push away chaos and establish order. And then the other 12 principles are meant to keep order from becoming tyrannical. Read, I think you should read both of them, but either one of the two, and I think you really enjoy it. Okay. Well, this is a little clip from a lecture of his. It's not from either of these two books, but he's going to talk about something called the Pareto. It's Italian. So distribution. And this is, and I'm not going to give it away. No spoilers here. This is a very, very interesting phenomenon in statistics And one, I want you to watch this and then answer the question: how might the Pareto distribution change the way we think about political, social solutions to the problems of poverty and economic advancement? Okay, and you'll see why I'm asking you to watch his video on this distribution, which, by the way, is a it's a law of physics within economics that whenever you have a distribution of things, an exchange of things, you get something that looks like the Pareto curve, or I mean, always as an end game. All right. Well, given that, how then do we tackle these problems? Okay. And I'm not going to say what it is because then I give it away. All right. So a little short video. Okay. And then finally, the fourth thing I want you to look at, and this is just kind of a gimme. Why should we be interested in statistics? I mean, many of you have emailed me saying, I'm a little nervous about this class. I'm not sure. I'm concerned. Okay, I understand that. And please stay in contact with me, dialogue as we go through the semester. All right. But we should be interested in statistics. And you're going to read a little bit from an author, Alan Smith, that will suggest why we should be interested in statistics. Okay. So that's the focus for this week. Some terminology, some understanding of what we mean when we're talking about different kinds of variables. Now you can apply some of that knowledge to a question about the Pareto distribution. And given that this is a law of distribution within politics and economics, how might this affect solutions that we would have to these big societal problems? And then finally, concerning statistics, why the heck should we care? Okay. All right, everybody, post those paper questions or paper topics, excuse me, in that discussion box that's up in the pinned. I put it up. And again, I apologize, for some of you like, where is it? Where is it? Have a great week. All right. I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you. And I will see you on Canvas. Bye-bye.